Good morning, everyone. My name is Rashmi, and today I'm going to discuss literary criticism and Aristotle poetics. And in this video lecture, I have discussed literary criticism and Aristotle poetics, the concept of Aristotle regarding the tragedy, tragic hero, plot, character, etc. So, before going in detail to discuss Aristotle poetics, let's discuss the word criticism. जो ये वर्ड है आपका criticism, it is derived from the Greek word kritikos. Kritikos, which meaning is judgment. So basically we can say that in criticism point out the beauties and the faults of a work, the negative as well as the positive point of a particular work. किसी भी वर्क में उसके फॉल्ट्स और ब्यूटीज प्लस नेगेटिव और पॉजिटिव एस्पेक्ट्स को फाइंड आउट करना ही क्रिटिसिज्म है. And in Greek language, a critic is called criterion, in Latin criticus, or in English is a critic. जो क्रिटिक है इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज में हम जिसको क्रिटिक बोलते हैं वही उसको ग्रीक लैंग्वेज में क्राइटियन, लैटिन लैंग्वेज में क्रिटिकस कहते हैं. देन क्रिटिसिज्म इज अ स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ जजिंग वेल. जैसे अरिस्टोटल ने भी कहा है कि जो क्रिटिसिज्म है वो एक स्टैंडर्ड है, स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ जजिंग वेल. किसी भी वर्क को एक जज करते हैं जब हम उसके जो ब्यूटीज है, जो फॉल्ट्स हैं, जो उसमें क्वालिटीज है, डीमेरिट्स हैं, उन सबको जब हम काउंट करते हैं या फाइंड आउट करते हैं, एक क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस जब हम किसी वर्क के करते हैं, दैट इज कॉल्ड अ पर्टिकुलर क्रिटिसिज्म. To set up as a critic is to set up as a judge of values. जैसे जो आई रिचर्ड हैं उसने भी बोला है कि जो to set up as a critic is to set up as a judge of values. If you are going to judge a book, then the main function of a critic is to set up as a judge of values. मीन्स आप एक पर्टिकुलर वर्क को जब आप क्रिटिसाइज करते हो, जब आप उसको एनालाइज करते हो, देन द मेन फंक्शन ऑफ अ क्रिटिक इज टू फाइंड आउट इट्स फॉल्ट्स, merits, demerits, beauties, negative and positive points as well. The main function of a critic is that a critic is like a pathologist. जैसे कि जो पैथोलॉजिस्ट होता है जब वो किसी की ब्लड की या फिर किसी चीज़ की जब वो जांच करते हैं तो डजेंट मैटर कि उस पर्सन का ब्लड ग्रुप या आई मीन उस पर्सन का कलर, एज, इन चीज़ों से उसको कोई मैटर नहीं होता. मेन फंक्शन होता है कि जो पैथोलॉजिस्ट है ही इज टोटली अनबायस्ड व्हेन ही इज गोइंग टू एग्जामिन द वेरी ब्लड ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर पर्सन. सो इन द सेम वे जब एक क्रिटिक किसी भी वर्क को क्रिटिसाइज करता है तो उसको ही शुड बी ऑब्जेक्टिव, नॉट सब्जेक्टिव. क्रिटिसिज्म इज द कमेंटेशन एंड एक्सपोजिशन ऑफ वर्क्स ऑफ आर्ट बाय मीन्स ऑफ रिटन वर्ड. अकॉर्डिंग टू टी.एस. एलियट जो क्रिटिसिज्म है ये कमेंटेशन है, एक्सपोजिशन है किसी भी वर्क के ऊपर रिटन वर्ड में. जब हम रिटन फॉर्म में किसी भी वर्क के ऊपर अपने कमेंट, एक्सपोजिशन, अपने आइडियाज, अपने थॉट्स देते हैं, दैट इज कॉल्ड क्रिटिसिज्म. So in this way we can say that these are the various definition given by a number of critic. जैसे according to Carlyle, criticism is an interpretation and an assessment of merit of works of art. कार्लाइल ने भी बोला है कि जो क्रिटिसिज्म है वो एक इंटरप्रिटेशन है, एक असेसमेंट है, मेरिट ऑफ वर्क्स ऑफ आर्ट. किसी भी वर्क की किसकी कितनी उसमें मेरिट्स है, कितनी उसमें डीमेरिट्स हैं, क्या उसकी क्वालिटीज हैं, इन सब के ऊपर एक इंटरप्रिटेशन करना, एक असेसमेंट देना अपना, दैट इज कॉल्ड क्रिटिसिज्म. Okay, so there are a number of definitions, number of you can say point of view regarding criticism according by a number of critic. जैसे ड्राइडन ने भी बोला है कि जो वर्ड आई मीन जो क्रिटिसिज्म है दैट इज एन इनफॉर्मल डिस्कशन ऑफ लिटरेचर. Dryden was the first writer who used the word criticism in literature. So in this way we can say that the criticism is actually it's a critical analysis of a work to find out its qualities, merits, demerits, positive, negative aspects, beauties as well. All these things a critic is find out in a work when he or she is going to analyze a particular work. Now come to Aristotle Poetics. Aristotle, the Greek master and philosopher, who has written Poetics, and in this particular book, the Poetics, he has given his theory regarding tragedy, tragic hero, comedy, characters, plots, spectacles, etc. Actually, we can say that Poetics is the very base of English literature, because this is the book that recount the rules, regulations, theories regarding a lots of things that was later you can say that was later accepted by a number of authors in English literature. So we can say that the very base of English literature is poetics, क्योंकि जो poetics है इसमें जितने भी रूल्स रेगुलेशन, जो भी थियरीज एरिस्टोटल ने उसमें दी है, जितने भी बाद में जितनी भी ट्रेजेडीज लिखी गई, वो सब इसी पे ही बेस है. तो वी कैन से कि जो poetics है दैट इज द होल ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर. इसलिए आज हम जो पोएटिक्स है एरिस्टोटल का उसको डिस्कस करेंगे. सो द पोएटिक्स, इट इज डिवाइडेड इनटू 26 चैप्टर, and in these 26 chapters he has discussed a lots of different things, like from chapter 1st to 3rd he has discussed theory of imitation. चैप्टर 1 से लेके 3 तक पोएटिक्स में एरिस्टोटल ने थियरी ऑफ इमिटेशन को डील किया है. देन चैप्टर 4 to 5th he has discussed origin and development of poetry, and then from chapter 6 to 19 he has given his theory of tragedy. This is the very soul of this book, Poetics, theory of tragedy, in which he has given definitions, various parts, plots, characters, diction, etc. Then from chapter 20 to 22 he has given his theory regarding diction and style. Then from chapter 23 to 24 epic and tragedy, and chapter 25th he has given objection of critics and Aristotle answers. जो चैप्टर 25th है इस पोएटिक्स का, इसमें एरिस्टोटल ने जितने भी ऑब्जेक्शन या जो भी इस पे लेबल किए हैं, जो भी दोष, लाइक जो एरिस्टोटल के जो मास्टर थे प्लेटो, उनके जितने भी लेबल थे पोएटिक्स को लेके, जितने भी अगेंस्ट उन्होंने जो भी कमेंट दिया था, उन सबका एक आंसर इसमें दिया है चैप्टर 25 में. एंड चैप्टर 26 में उसने दिया है अपना एपिक एंड ट्रेजेडी एंड सुपीरियोरिटी ऑफ ट्रेजेडी. इसको बताया, सुपीरियोरिटी ऑफ ट्रेजेडी दिखाया है. सो चैप्टर 1st to 3rd एरिस्टोटल lays the theory of imitation, and as I told you, according to Aristotle, imitation is the common principle of all the fine arts. It may be poetry, comedy, tragedy, dancing, music, flute playing, painting, sculpture, etc. are all modes of imitation. As we can say that if you are going to paint a painting, if you are writing to a poetry, if you are going to play flute playing, if you are going to dancing, you just to imitate the things firstly, then recreate with your own thoughts, with your own imagination. So that is the theory of imitation. Means we can say that the whole world of or we can say the entire world is working on the theory of imitation, because the human nature is imitative. If you are going to learn a new things, firstly you have to imitate the people. Imitate the people which are, those are expert in that art which you are going to learn. So in this way, theory of imitation is necessary for learning a new things, a new art. Though imitation is the common principle of the fine arts, the various arts differ from each other in three ways. Means, as I recalled a number of activity above, like poetry, comedy, tragedy, dancing, music, flute playing, painting, sculpture, and all these activities are a way of imitation. All these things working on a common principle, that is imitation. But all these things are different in one way or other way. How? In their medium of imitation, object of imitation, and in manner of imitation. Means these are the three things which differ from one art to another. Okay, so this is the very theory of imitation given by Aristotle. Now come to the second one, chapter 4 to 5. He discussed origin and development of poetry, means how the poetry developed and how the writers or the poets they started writing poetry. In the very beginning, poetry was of two kinds. Number one, iambus or invectives. Number two, Hammon on the gods or in the great. Now, what is iambus? Iambus or invectives developed into the satiric poetry, and the Hammon and panegyric into epic or heroic poetry. Simply, we can say that the first one, iambus, it developed into satiric poetry. Means later it was known by the name of satiric poetry. As for example, in the 18th century, a lot of great writers like Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, and your Dryden. He has written a lot of great satirical poetries. So the iambus or invective, later it was known by the name of satiric poetry. And if we talk about the second one, Hammon on the gods or on the great, so it was later known by the name of epic poetry. Means it has a grand, it is written in grand style. And for example, like Paradise Lost by Milton, and Homer, Iliad and Odyssey, Aeneid by Virgil. These are some example of heroic poetry. Now, what is comedy? According to Aristotle, it is an imitation of man worse than the average. Means simply we can say that comedy is an imitation of man worse than the average or of a lower type that excites laughter, is something ugly and distorted without causing pain. Means comedy is an imitation of man worse than the average, and it creates laughter. It creates laughter between the audiences and is something ugly but without causing pain. Means without hurting anyone. So this is the very definition given by this is the very definition of comedy given by Aristotle. Now come to the next one, chapter 6 to 19. This deal the theory of tragedy, which is the soul of the Poetics and the most prominent part of the book Poetics written by Aristotle. Now what is tragedy? Today we regard tragedy as a story with an unhappy ending, but this was not the Greek conception. In Greek language, the word tragedy means a god song, and according to Aristotle, tragedy is an imitation of an action which is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude in a language beautified in different parts with different kinds of embellishment through action and not narration, and through scenes of pity and fear, bringing about the catharsis of these emotions. Means this is a very beautiful definition given by Aristotle. As he said, tragedy is an imitation of an action. Means to tragedy hai, it's an imitation of an action which is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. Now this word magnitude, what is the meaning of magnitude? Actually, according to Aristotle, the tragedy it should not be too long, TWO too long, not too short, TWO too short. It contain a particular length, a size that is of a certain magnitude. Means it consists certain length. In a language beautified in different parts with different kinds of embellishment. Means at the same time a writer should use an elevated language which beautified the different parts of a tragedy through action and not narration. Tragedy is a part which is acted, which is performed on the stage, not narrated, and through scenes of pity and fear, bringing about the catharsis of these emotions. This is the most prominent part of a tragedy. This is the main function of a tragedy. What? By arousing the feeling of pity and fear, it catharsis of the emotions of the audience. This is the main function of a tragedy according to Aristotle. So this is the very definition given by Aristotle that is supposed to be the very beautiful definition ever given by any author about tragedy. Now, what are the parts of tragedy? As I mentioned here in this slide, in the right side of the slide, you can see the parts of tragedy. These are the 6 parts of a tragedy. Like the first one, plot, character, thought, diction, songs, and spectacles. These are the 6 prominent part of a tragedy. Now, what is plot? The plot, simply we can say, it's a representation of events, a logical representation of events in a story, that is called plot, and it can be divided into 2 parts according to Aristotle: simple and complex. Now, what is simple plot? Simple plot, simply we can say, it's a logical, it's a representation, or it's a representation of the events, and all the events, they are narrated in a story in a logical way, without peripeteia and without anagnorisis. Simple plot, we don't find peripeteia and anagnorisis. Now, what is peripeteia and anagnorisis? Later we will discuss in detail. Now, the complex one, which is according to Aristotle, which is the better one. Now, what is complex plot? In the complex plot, all the events and incidents, they are connected logically, one events followed by the other continuously, and it has peripeteia and anagnorisis both. Means it is supposed to be the great plot because all the events, they knit together in a logical manner, and all the events and incidents, they are going in a sequence. So according to Aristotle, this is the better one, and he prefers the complex plot for a tragedy. Now, what is character? If the plot is the soul of a tragedy, according to Aristotle, plot is the soul of a tragedy, but character is the body of a tragedy. Means if plot is the soul, character is the body. Now, what are the characteristics of good characters? According to Aristotle, the characters, they should be lifelike characters. They are the living human beings. They are the like of living human beings. Their action, reaction, dialogues, performance, it should be like the real human beings. When the audiences, they are going to stage, they are going to saw a performance happening on the stage, and the characters, they are playing various roles according to their own. So their actions, reactions should be natural, so that the audiences, they easily identify themselves with the characters. So according to Aristotle, this is the basic and essential quality of a character. Now come to the next thing, that is thought. Now, what is thought? Actually, thought, we can say, it is the power of saying whatever can be said or what is appropriate to the occasion. Means the thought or the ideas, it should be according to the occasion, it should be according to the story, it should be according to the role which is playing by the character on the stage, right? So the very thought or the characters representing by the characters on the stage, it should be appropriate to the characters, okay, or according to the story or the theme or the subject matter. Then the next is diction. Diction can be called the language, or the meters, and we can say the, simply we can say, the style which is used in a tragedy. Diction in a tragedy. As a general rule, the language of tragedy must be clear and it must not be mean. Means simply we can say the language of a tragedy, it should be elevated, it should be dignified. At the same time, it should be clear, it should be comprehensible to the readers and to the audiences as well. Then the second and the next is songs and spectacles. These are also the beautiful parts of a tragedy. Songs and spectacles, we can say, these are, according to Aristotle, the dramatist must depend for his effect on his own powers rather than on the spectacle. He writes, fear and pity can be produced by spectacular means, but it is much better to produce them by the way you write your play. Means simply we can say these are the beautiful parts of a tragedy, songs and spectacles, which also play a prominent role in a tragedy. So these are the various parts of tragedy. which given Aristotle in the Poetics. Now come to the next, tragic hero. The tragic hero is a great man who is neither a paragon of virtue and justice nor undergoes the change to misfortune, though any real badness or wickedness, but because of some mistake. Means, according to Aristotle, the tragic hero neither too good, too good, neither too bad. Means a tragic hero should be a ordinary man, should be a common man, so that the audiences they can identify themselves with the character. If the tragic hero should be too good like a saint, or if should be too bad like a villain, so the downfall or the destruction of the tragic hero it not affect to the people. So according to Aristotle, the tragic hero it should be a great man who is neither a paragon of virtue and justice nor undergoes of the change of misfortune, though any real badness. Means the hero should neither too good nor too bad, and it has a weakness in his character. Means that is simply we can say tragic flaw or hamartia. Tragic flaw, which is called hamartia in Greek language, that is an error of judgment, a weakness in character, which causes the downfall of a tragic hero. Then three unities. According to Aristotle, three unities play a prominent role in a tragedy. These are the unities: unity of time, unity of action, and unity of place. Now, what is unity of time? According to Aristotle, the play it should be completed within 24 hours. Means it should be completed into a day. And unity of action. According to Aristotle, there should be no subplot in a tragedy. There should be a single plot. Though there can be a number of events, but they interlink with each other logically. So there should be no subplot and no other stories. There should be one single plot, one main story. Then unity of place. Unity of place, we can simply say that unity of place है. According to Aristotle, the play it should be started from which place, it should be ended with the same place. Means it cannot be happen that the one scene is performing in Alexandria, second second in Athens, third in England, fourth in America. No, if you are if you are starting the story from Thebes, the story or the play should be completed in Thebes. Okay, so this is the unity of place. So these are the three unities laid by Aristotle in the Poetics. So next is catharsis. According to Aristotle, catharsis is purgation, purification, clarification of emotions. Means this is the main part, or we can say that this is the function of a tragedy, to catharsis or by arousing the feeling of pity and fear. It catharses the emotions of the audiences. Which type of emotions? The strong emotions. Catharsis gives or catharsis releasing the emotions of strong emotions of the audiences by arousing the feeling of pity and fear. It clarify, it purgate, it purify the emotions, the strong emotions of the audiences, and at the same time it gives a moral lesson to the audience that if they did the same things, they got the same downfall, they got the same destruction which a tragic hero got. So this is the very function of a tragedy. Then the next one is peripeteia. Peripeteia and anagnosis, as I have discussed earlier when I was discussing the plot. These are the two terms given by Aristotle. Now what is peripeteia? Peripeteia is simply, we can say that it's a sudden reversal of fortune or change in circumstances. And the second, anagnosis, recognition or discovery of truth, in which a principal character recognizes his or her true identity. These two terms we can better understand through an example as Oedipus the Rex. It's a great tragedy written by the Greek dramatist Sophocles. In this, what happened? Oedipus, the king of Thebes, he come to know that he murdered his father, King Laius, and married to his mother, Jocasta. This is the very moment. This is Anagnosis, when he discovered the truth, when he discovered his true identity. Okay, so this is the moment of Anagnosis. Now, what is Peripeteia? According to Peripeteia, or after knowing the truth, or after knowing his true identity, that he murdered his father and married to his mother unknowingly, a sudden reversal in his, I mean, a sudden reversal came in his misfortune. What happened? After knowing the truth, Oedipus, he stabs his eyes with his two rods, and Jocasta, she hanged herself, she commits suicide. So in this way, a sudden reversal came in the fortune of Oedipus. So these are the two terms, Anagnosis and Peripeteia, and one followed by the another. So in this way, we can say that according to Aristotle, these two terms, I mean these two things happen in a story or in a tragedy. When the tragedy becomes more elevated, it becomes more beautiful. Okay, and this happens in a complex plot, as I told you earlier. So today I have discussed Aristotle, the poetics, and the various parts of poetics, and the definition of tragedy, its parts, parts of tragedy, and the terms given by Aristotle. So now I hope all these things, it becomes more comprehensible, it becomes more easy to understand for you people. So if you have any query, any question regarding anything regarding tragedy, theory of imitation, or the parts of tragedy, so you can write down in the comment box. Thank you.